We're here for a meeting of the Naples Daily News Editorial Board, and joining us is Ellen Seigel, one of the 6 candidates for one of the 3 seats available on the Naples City Council. Thanks for joining us, Ellen.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and start out. Talk a little bit about how long you've been in Naples and where you came from.
Thank you. So we came to Naples 11 years ago from Guilford, Connecticut. And it wasn't that we were from Guilford. I always say we raised our children there. I actually grew up in a little town on Long Island called Elmont, and I went to public school, Elmont Memorial High School. Ended up in Western New York State for college. I went to the University of Buffalo, and also have a master's degree in healthcare administration from George Washington University.
And what brought you to Naples?
We had first come to Naples in the early 70s. My husband was in the public health service, and he was assigned to work in Immokalee. And that was our first introduction to the west coast of Florida. And we were bowled over with how beautiful it was, and continued to come to Naples on vacations for the past 30 to 40 years. And so when it was time for us to retire, we knew we were not the sort to be comfortable on the east coast of Florida, and that's why we decided on Naples.
And talk a little bit about what's consumed your life over these years in terms of what you've been active with, and also what you've been active with here in the city.
So first, are you asking about my career in Connecticut?
Yeah.
I was, I'll just backtrack a little bit and say that the public high school that I went to had a very strong math department, and that instilled in me a lifelong love of math. And unfortunately, I got bad career counseling in college and was a math major, which was really, by my junior year, way over my head. I really should have been a business major. But I corrected that in graduate school, and I was able to combine my love of organization with my interest in healthcare. So I got a master's in healthcare administration. And while I was in graduate school, I started working for Group Health Association, which was my first introduction to HMOs, and this was in the early 70s. And then when we moved to Connecticut, that ended up being my career track. I worked for 3 additional HMOs, the last one being a statewide HMO. And under the category that you're a product of all of your experiences in life, I would say that the career that I had has really prepared me for what I'm embarking on now. I was very fortunate to work finally for a superb company that had superb leadership, and the skills that I learned from those people carry forward to this day. When we came to Naples, it was really the first time in my life that I had not worked. And for a little while, I was really unhappy here. I started a small math tutoring business, and that brought me great joy, particularly working with young children. And then I was invited to join the board of the Park Shore Association, and that really led me on my path to thinking that I could be a candidate for Naples City Council. I started out serving as the membership chair for 3 years, during a period of time when there was great divisiveness in the Park Shore Association, and I often use that period of time as an example of leadership. The board had a vision of what it wanted to accomplish. It wanted to build a restroom at its beach park that they had had for 30 years. The membership was not supportive of that idea, and yet the board knew it was the right thing to do, and we persevered. And after that experience, I became president of the Park Shore Association, and again encouraged the board to stop focusing just on the beach park, but look at the entire Park Shore community. And that's where some of the ideas that I'm taking some credit for in my campaign, specifically the trees along Creighton Road and the new decorative stop signs that were introduced throughout the city, that is an example of the type of work that I did for the Park Shore Association. And then finally, for almost 2 years now, I've served on the Planning Advisory Board. And that has been such an education to me. It's allowed me to go to neighborhoods that were not on my normal, beaten path, and has obviously given me a track record and a record that people can see how I think and the decisions that I make.
Once you've gotten active with government here, obviously, from what you've just explained to everybody, what have you seen the city council do in the last couple of years that you would have done differently?
So I often start by saying, why am I running? And I often say that, first of all, Naples is such a wonderful city that the leadership of the city, namely the city council, needs to be a highly admired body. And I had the luxury of time and have been able to sit in on those city council meetings now for almost a year and a half. And at times, I'm not proud of how city council conducts itself publicly. And I would like to add more of a professional aspect to the people that serve on city council. So that's one of my issues. The other important issue that I've actually given a lot of thought to recently is the whole idea of goal setting. I don't see city council prior to beginning the discussions of the operating budget and the capital budget having an open forum with themselves and the public about what should be the goals that we want to accomplish for the coming year. And more importantly, how do we measure that those goals have been accomplished at the end of the year? I know that other cities have done incredible jobs in this area, and I would like the city of Naples to learn more about that and consider emulating on some level that type of way to go ahead prior to starting to talk about how much we're going to pay for things.
Can you give me a specific example of a moment when you were not proud of the city council?
So I don't think it's appropriate for me to say anything negatively about individuals, but I think that the time it takes for city council meetings to take place is, I just don't see a cost benefit to that. I think that some of the conversations haven't been focused. I feel that sometimes city council members have not prepared themselves properly, and that adds to the unnecessary length of the meeting.
And on the flip side, can you give me an example of cities that you cite that do set goals or do have a more proper budget format that you spoke of?
Well, first of all, I don't want to say anything negative about how the city has gone about setting up a very transparent budget. And frankly, the only city that I've actually looked at in depth is the city of Williamsburg, Virginia, and they have an incredible website, and everything is very transparent, and they have goals and objectives, and it's very impressively done. But that has probably been a system that has been in place there, I'm guessing, for decades. So it wouldn't be easy for us to just immediately replicate that. But I do think that at times I hear statements made by various members of city council that I feel I, as a citizen, have no objective measure of whether what they're saying is true or not. And I think that statements should be backed up by facts.
What's your feeling about where the city's vision is right now in terms of the downtown area?
So this is why it's been fortunate for me to be on the Planning Advisory Board, because I've been very involved in many of the heated issues that have come about. So first of all, let me say that I'm extremely proud of where we are in terms of Fifth Avenue. And we've come such a long way. I can't say that I was a full-time resident here in the 90s, but I certainly visited Naples, and I saw empty storefronts, and I saw how unattractive it was to be on Fifth Avenue. And I think that mixed-use residential is the ideal way to go. And I'm proud of some of the projects that I have approved as a member of the Planning Advisory Board. But I'm also sensitive to, and again, fortunately, because I've been running for city council, I've been invited to have meetings with small groups of residents. And my last two were with groups of old Naples residents. And I hear them. I really understand that they are justifiably concerned that the direction of density and traffic is something that city council needs to be very concerned about. And I would love to be part of that solution. my husband and I, have ties to Western New York State, and we see how overtaxing and just the general malaise of the area has contributed to an increase in unemployment. And you go there and you see how poorly maintained the roads are. There's no public landscaping. And then we come back to Naples and we realize that Naples may have these problems, but so much better to have problems of growth and development than to have problems of stagnation. And I will welcome the opportunity to try to make Naples even better than it is.
I suspect one of the problems you hear about when you talk to Naples residents is the question of another parking garage in the Fifth Avenue South area. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, that has not been brought up at all. So,
Is parking not a concern of theirs?
absolutely, it's a concern, but no one has raised specifically the idea of a third parking garage. And I know that some of the proposals for parking underneath future buildings is well received by people. They recognize that is one solution that would help to alleviate the parking problem.
Are those same people then okay with the idea of buildings going up higher than perhaps because there's parking underneath?
Absolutely not, absolutely not. They are very vehement that the city's charter needs to be the Bible by which we decide on the height of buildings. And as a member of the Planning Advisory Board, and I obviously have a record of having now approved at least two projects where the embellishments are over that 42 feet, and I hear from people that they just don't believe that that's acceptable. And yet I also recognize that there is a legitimate basis for arguing that embellishments were not part of the charter and therefore would allow pieces of buildings to be above the 42 feet. I'll just talk to you a little bit about my own learning curve on this matter. So I was appointed to the Planning Advisory Board in June of 2014, and one of the very first projects, and as part of my interviewing for the Planning Advisory Board, Vice Mayor D. Sulik brought up this 42-foot issue. And I pledged at my interview that I believed in the distinct character of Naples and the attempt to keep this a small town feel. And so when the Hyatt Hotel project came before the Planning Advisory Board, I took that pledge very seriously, and I voted against the project. I was the only one on the Planning Advisory Board to vote against the Hyatt Hotel project, and I voted against it not because it wasn't going to be a beautiful building, and also I want to just add for the benefit of the public that there is going to be a public concourse around the edge of the building so that people will have a view of the river. But nevertheless, I voted against it because of the height issue. And I thought also, particularly because it was in the flight path, that might be another good reason to object to any embellishments. So I lost on that vote 6-1. And then I was eager to go to the city council meeting and hear how that issue was going to be discussed as part of my learning experience. And there again, I could be wrong, I'm sure you have the facts, but I believe there the vote was also 6-1 in favor of the project. And so from that, I said to myself, well, this is a learning experience for me, and obviously city council doesn't take that 42-foot height limit as gospel. And so then I did obtain more information about it, and obviously recognize that in the city's code of ordinance under heights that embellishments are described, and that obviously they need a conditional approval.
So you look at those now on a case-by-case basis?
That's how I've approached everything on the Planning Advisory Board, case by case, but with a great, tremendous deal of angst and study and personally visiting the site.
City Council's spent a considerable amount of time getting Baker Park to where it is, and also the Central Avenue corridor changes that are coming. We'll have a new council with a new majority. Do you envision undoing any of those decisions?
So they were very, very eager, particularly the people that were going to be termed out, to finally be involved in making decisions on that. And so right at the last minute, they made a decision on Baker Park and they made a decision on Central Avenue. And I'm happy that projects that had so many years of discussion could finally be decided by the people that were involved in that discussion, rather than starting with a brand-new city council.
Would that also hold true of the city dock, or do you have a vision?
No, I'm eager. Actually, they did make a decision on the city dock, but I've been on record even before that of being very supportive of redoing the city dock. That's right. There were three issues:
Yeah.
Baker Park, Central Avenue, and the city dock. They all got done.
So you don't see undoing any of those when you're coming in? You're going to stick with the direction of the current council?
Absolutely.
Does the city have enough money to do all three?
So that gets to my point about goal setting and deciding what is important for the citizens of Naples and what is important particularly for the people that make the decision about that, city council. I'd like to have a discussion about that with my fellow potential city council members. There are many capital issues that I think we need to talk about. And then there are some organizational issues that we need to talk about. And one of the topics that I actually wanted to bring up in talking to you is the whole issue of emergency services. Because I think that this is an area where there is the potential to be more efficient. And by being more efficient, that we might be able to save some money. And I would welcome the opportunity to talk about that. I had brought with me an article that I kind of use as my mantra to show you how I approach issues. And it has to do with the whole issue of basic life support and advanced life support, and the type of training and the type of professionals that we want taking care of us. And my bias, again from my healthcare experience, is that people get good at something when they do it a lot. And when you don't do something a lot and there's an emergency, you're not quite as efficient as somebody. And I'll give you an example: intubation. Somebody that's done that 1,000 times is going to be much better and more proficient than somebody that's done it 5 times or watched it being done once. And the other important thing that I think is important, and people are surprised about this, but a national study of thousands of Medicare beneficiaries has shown that patients in the long term do better when they just receive basic life support services and then are transferred to hospitals as quickly as possible than patients who are treated by professionals who have training in advanced life support. And my guess is that part of the reason for that is that you're delaying the patient getting to the hospital. And statistically, it shows that in the long term, patients do better with basic life support. So when we train people for advanced life support, first of all, there's an added cost to us, but also we're not going to get the results that we might get with a lesser level of service.
And so how does that translate into what you would do in terms of changing the makeup of the fire department?
So I'm not going to be so presumptuous as to talk about that, but I do feel that it's important to recognize that, first of all, when we talk about emergency services, what are we talking about? We're talking about, first of all, that medical emergencies are far more common and far more important to the citizens of Naples than structural fires. It's the reality of our world. And so I would like to have more of a discussion about emergency services in total, but focusing on medical emergencies more than fire.
There's been some discussion about the city joining in with what's called closest available response, where a city union might sometimes be called to go outside the city because it happens to be closer to a given emergency. Some folks don't want the city's units leaving the city other than in perhaps dire circumstances. What are your thoughts on that?
So again, I have a very personal experience with that has shaped my feelings. And the experience was this, that the home that we lived in Park Shore for 10 years was on Whispering Pine Way, which is very near Seagate Drive. It's the most northern part of Park Shore. had an elderly neighbor, 95 years old. Over the course of 10 years, there would be times when she didn't feel quite well. She'd call us up because my husband is a physician. He'd go over and with his stethoscope, he would check her, and oftentimes he would be able to reassure her that everything was okay. However, there were probably 2 or 3 times when he didn't like the way she looked. They'd call 911, and within 5 minutes, we had the biggest array of fire trucks on our street that the Spring Pine had ever seen. And I had to say to myself, I wasn't even running for city council then, but when you're interested in efficiency, you say to yourself, there's something wrong here. There's just something wrong here that is the way, and also I might want to just add that there's a firehouse on Pine Ridge Road, which is part of North Naples, and that's part of your question, which would have been far closer than coming from the city's number 2 location.
The pollution that's occurring in Naples Bay from the runoff coming down from Golden Gate Estates and also the outfalls on the beach. Can you talk about the state of the city's polluted waterways and what needs to be done to address those?
This was an issue that came up with Old Naples, and what I like to say, first of all, is just in terms of talking about the outfalls, because that was of particular interest to Old Naples. So you have this little piece of valuable geography between Naples Bay and the Gulf of Mexico, Old Naples, the heart of the city. And first of all, I want to commend our city for what it has done to require that as homes are rebuilt, that there are mandatory, costly things that homeowners need to do to try to retain as much rainwater on their property as possible. But nevertheless, with unusually hard rainstorms, it's impossible to trap all that water on land. The water has to go somewhere. It goes into swales. The city, again, has done miraculous things to try to hold back the water, but nevertheless, the water has to go somewhere. And when it goes through pipes, and those pipes have had leaves and debris flowing into them, that water is not clean. And yet it has to go somewhere. It has to go into the bay. It has to go into the Gulf of Mexico. And so the question for us will be, again, a cost-benefit issue. How much is it possible to first of all, redirect the water elsewhere? How expensive will that be? And these are going to be challenges for the future city council. In terms of the Golden Gate Canal, the issues are similar, but they're on a much grander scale, because there you have water coming in from the Everglades and from north of Naples. Again, the water has to go somewhere. Obviously, it would be better if the water could be better filtered by public lands further north. And there have been opportunities for the state of Florida to purchase land that unfortunately they did not go ahead with, and now that land is very expensive. So some of the issues having to do with the Golden Gate Canal are really out of the control of Naples City Council. And yet the city has attempted to do very wonderful things in terms of stormwater retention.
Traffic is another situation where a lot of the decisions that are made end up sending the traffic into the city. Is there anything that specifically that you can see that the city can do to address the traffic problem?
So I'm not going to profess to have any magical answers for that. I've heard candidates for mayor talk about synchronizing the lights. I have often said that you can't predict what will come in the future, and I'm hoping that there'll be opportunities in terms of better technology to control traffic into the city, but also how people get around. And I've used Uber as an example, as an opportunity that would decrease the number of cars coming into the city. People could leave their cars at a central location and then take Uber or some other transportation into the city. I don't have any magical answers for that, but I would certainly be welcome to trying to work on solving that problem. And after growth and development, traffic is what I hear the most about.
We've got a minute left here, Ellen. Is there anything that we haven't covered here that you wanted to be sure we covered?
No, I was very much wanting to talk about emergency services and goal setting, and I thought I'm glad I had an opportunity to talk about both of those.
Thank you, Ellen.